Okay, right now on my photos, I'm just adding a little exposure effect, and I'm going to mirror them as well. I'm just adding on the mirror effect as well, which is just tiles. So what you want to do is go to shapes, add a square and make it fill both of your photos, just like this, and go to the gradient and do what I'm doing. Try to make the line as straight as possible. Okay, now split it down the middle, go onto your first one and add on displacement map. Now tap on Y, add 2 keyframes, one at the beginning and one at the end, and adjust it to whatever you'd like. I did 320. Now follow my graph. It is really important that you do this specific graph if you want the smoothness that mine has. If you have like a personal graph, you could use that as well. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and add the exposure effect on. So I'm just going to go to color and light and then exposure and gamma. And I had a keyframe at the beginning and one at the end, and I changed it to about 0.55. It doesn't really matter the graph you do for this one. This was just my own personal graph. Now you want to go onto your second rectangle, add on displacement map again, select invert, go back onto the Y offset, add 2 keyframes, and on the first one make it negative of what you did the first time, so mine's going to be negative 320. Follow my graph I'm doing for this one as well, because it's also very important if you want it to be smooth. So yeah, this is what it looks like for now. You could keep it like this if you wanted, but if you really want like the smooth like wipe, then you're going to want to follow this next step. I'm just finishing the exposure off right here. I'm just going to make it 0.55 again, and then on the last keyframe I'm just going to turn it back down to 0 and then just do my out graph. Now what I'm going to do once I have my exposure done is I'm going to hold down on my rectangle and my first rectangle and my first photo, and I'm going to put those two in a group together. I'm just going to group them together, and I'm going to do the same thing to the second ones. Now go ahead onto your first group and add on tiles so it mirrors your photo. Make sure to select mirror, otherwise, yeah. Now go on to move and transform, and then just do a simple slide down transition like I'm doing here. Ignored this because I did it a little too far, and you don't have to follow this graph. You can do your own personal graph. I ended up not using this first one because it was too slow for my liking. I also adjusted the crop because it was very awkward. As you can see, it was very slow, so I just changed the graph on the position to the one I always use, just like this. And now you're going to want to go into your second photo and then just finish off your going down transition or your downward transition. I'm going to go ahead soon, like right here, and fix the crop on this one as well because it was not looking good. I don't know. But yeah, this is pretty much the final transition. I highly recommend that you add motion blur onto it, but other than that, you're good to go and you should be done. I also just wanted to add that you should definitely add on the exposure because that's what kind of makes the transition like whole. In my opinion, you obviously don't have to add it if you don't feel like it, but I just feel like that's what really makes the transition the transition. Also, you don't have to keyframe your motion blur like I'm doing. I just did that for the effect of it, but it really looked nice if you wanted to keyframe it. I don't ever keyframe mine. I just tried it new in this, and it ended up looking really good. So yeah. Okay, so right now I just have my 2 photos set up. I'm just adjusting them, so I'm going to tell you this. You might want to screen record the overlay I gave you because that's the one that fits most best with this, in my personal opinion. So just screen record the overlay I gave you right before this clip started. And yeah, so what you want to do once you have your 2 photos set up, you're going to want to go on to scale, zoom it in at the very beginning on the first keyframe, and on the second one, zoom it out to about 953. That's what I did. That's just like my default. It doesn't have to be yours. You guys can do whatever you'd like. You don't have to follow this specific graph either, though I do think it helps. Yeah, and yeah. I also added on wave warp and kind of like an edge zoom effect to like zoom it out. Now you're going to want to go into 3D and add on flip layer, and then just do a simple flip. Just make the first keyframe 0 and the second keyframe 180 degrees. You're going to want to have it on the dot because that's just what I do and that's what I prefer. That's also what looks best. That's my opinion though. You guys can always do whatever one you want. So yeah. And then just go ahead and copy my graph or do your own graph. Like I said, not that big of a deal, but I just prefer this graph. Now, what you want to do is after you have your graph adjusted, go on to your second photo, zoom it out to 953, just like your first photo, or whatever you made it. Go and add on flip layer onto this photo right here, and then just finish off that transition. Ignore what I'm doing here. You don't have to do any of this. I just tried to see something real quickly. I'm also zooming it in a little bit more than 953, and also I'm going to make the angle not exactly negative 180. I'm going to make it like negative 172 or 175. It doesn't have to be on the dot. I prefer it not being on the dot because when it's on the dot, it looks very awkward. So I'm just going to be adjusting it in this part because I was not a fan of how it was looking the first time. I think it looked good here, so yeah. So after this is done, that transition right there itself is done. What I'm doing is, I think I'm just adding motion blur on right here. It doesn't really do much, in my opinion, because I didn't really do it the right way. But yeah, so after your motion blur is added on, what you want to do is you want to hold your two photos down together and group them. This is where you're going to add the light sweep at. So go on to Effects, Add Effect, and Procedural. Scroll down until you see stripes and then select standard settings or whatever. Make the count 0.5 and make the width 0.7. I don't know if you don't have to do that if you don't want to, but that's just what I like. You could also change the angle. I preferred it the way it was though, so yeah. Make sure your color is white and then make the smoothing as much as you want. I prefer like 0.5 because, I don't know, I like that you can see it. Now, phase is where you're going to be able to move it, so just do the phase whichever way you'd like, just if you want. My first keyframe is 1.56, and my second keyframe, watching it go by, is going to be about, I don't know, like 0.86 apparently. Sorry, I was watching to see when it was ending. Because this is a voiceover, so I'm not doing it as I speak, which is kind of irritating, but yeah. So I also adjusted the keyframe to where it started and where it ended at, and I added on an out graph. This graph will change everything for you, so just make sure to add it. If you don't add a graph, it's not going to look as good, and yeah, that's basically just how you do it.